Hi everybody, my name is Courtney Edwards. I am a behavioral health coach working out of New Paltz in Carhonkson, and tonight we're going to be talking about how to manage holiday stress. This can be a really stressful time for a lot of folks, and that's all part and parcel of having extra obligations and spending time with family and the changes of the weather. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how you can learn to identify your sources of stress, how to set and hold boundaries through the holiday season, and then some techniques about how you can manage the stress if you're already experiencing it. So I thought it would be really helpful to start with, do you even know what causes your stress? And that might seem like a straightforward question, but I think for a lot of folks, we don't necessarily identify some of the things that we experience during this time of year with the ways that we're feeling inside, or the thoughts or feelings, emotions that we might be having. So I kind of thought about some of the things that I know will cause stress for me during the holiday season. So one of the things is, this is a time for a lot of folks of overindulgence. So that could be consuming more alcoholic beverages than you normally would. Lots of gatherings at work or with your families might mean that you're eating more sugar, or just eating at different times of day, eating heavy meals. And all of those things can have an impact on our body and the way that we feel. So for example, I know that if I have too much caffeine or too much sugar, sometimes I'll get a little jittery, feel a little bit anxious, and I can interpret that as stress, but really it's just my body responding to all of the things that I have been putting in it during the seasons of celebrations. When we kind of factor in that we are at our least amount of daylight around the holiday season, it's getting cold. Here in New York, we just had our first big snow a couple of days ago, and all of that can contribute to feeling a little stressed out too. And so when you start to fold these factors in, it can have a cumulative effect that can be really, really challenging. The second thing I wanted to mention is just the output that we're often expected to participate in during the holiday season. Like I mentioned, you might have gatherings at your work, things for if you have children, they might have recitals at school, you might have family obligations that you don't normally deal with during the rest of the year. And for a lot of folks, whether you identify as an introvert or maybe just aren't used to that much social activity, that can be really draining. And so sometimes just that drain can leave us feeling like we don't have the energy, the mental energy, the physical energy, or the resources to then sort of deal with the rest of our life. And again, so it's this kind of cumulative effect of you're putting so much out during the holiday season to be festive, and it's supposed to be a good thing, so we get in our head that we should be having fun. But it really can tax our system, and it can cause just some disruptions in the way that we're sleeping, the way we're moving through our lives. Which brings me to the next one of sensory overstimulation. So this is something that I feel like I struggle with in my life, so I'm speaking from experience here. But loud noises, overwhelming smells, close, cramped quarters. I know not everybody is engaging in that stuff since COVID, but some people are getting back into bigger social events. And so you might find yourself in a hot, crowded, loud room. And if you have a sensitive nervous system, that stimulation can be really difficult to deal with. And so again, it's taking a lot out of us to do these things that we've labeled as fun and festive, or maybe have labeled as obligations. And we're going to talk a little bit in a minute about setting some boundaries around that. And then another part that I don't think we talk about, I'll move here so you can see my other bullet point, but the financial strain of the holidays. Particularly 2022, we've been hearing in the news for the last year about inflation and changes in our economic landscape for so many families. But yet we often feel that we have these obligations to meet in terms of buying for friends, family, coworkers, children, whatever the case may be. And that can be a significant cause of stress. And so we're going to talk a little bit even about how to set some boundaries around that if that feels like something that's important to you. So if getting into this idea of setting boundaries, I think one of the most important things we need to do is to really think about what are our specific needs. And so my suggestion and what I would encourage you to do is think about, if everything else was equal, what would your perfect holiday look like? Would it be quiet, small gatherings with just the people that you care about the most? Maybe it is going out and getting all dressed up and going to a company dinner. Maybe it's doing it one time instead of 5 times. You know, whatever, there's no right or wrong answer to this, but when you think about what would you love your period of time from, say, Thanksgiving until New Year's Day to look like, really think about what would that be? How much time socializing? What would the limits and the boundaries around that socializing be? What do you wish gift giving looked like in your friend groups or your family groups? And start to really get in touch with what feels right and correct for you. Not this idea of what other people expect from you or what you should be doing, but what feels right and correct for you. And then when you get that picture, you hold it up against a picture of what do your holidays generally look like, and maybe you look to see, you know, what's already working, where are the places that maybe you can make some compromise, right? So you have this idealized version of what your holidays would look like, and maybe there's a few things in there you're like, all right, that doesn't need to be a non-negotiable, I can compromise there. But the goal would be to kind of look at what you would prefer, look at what you're currently contending with, and see where that middle ground is. And then state those needs to the people around you. And I think practicing those words can be really, really helpful when we're working to set boundaries. And so some of the ways that I help coach people through this is to always speak from your perspective. I need, right? So not you buy too many gifts, and that accusation of the person that you're talking to is often going to lead to them being really defended, right? And they're not going to hear you. So maybe another way to structure that kind of a boundary would say, my financial situation is not in line with the way that we've normally done gifts this year. I need to buy fewer gifts. I would like to suggest a grab bag, whatever, you know, and then you fill in that blank for what works for you. But really saying, this is what I need. You know, you're speaking from your own perspective. So I think, I feel, I need, I want, as opposed to you. Anytime we start a sentence with you and direct it at somebody else, walls and defenses go right up, and now nobody's communicating. So speak from your perspective. You can also set a boundary by saying if-then statements. So what comes to mind with this is, you know, you're at a big family gathering, maybe there's topics, politics, money, religion, any of the things that are challenging to sometimes talk about. Maybe you are coming from an identity that's not accepted within your family, right? And so you want to be able to say things like, if this, then that. If you continue to use homophobic language, I cannot come to Christmas dinner. If you continue to curse in front of my children, I cannot bring them to see you. So it's an if-then, right? So it's, this is the action that I need to set a boundary around, and this is the consequence for what that will look like if you can't uphold this, okay? And you can say that with a lot of love. You can say that with a lot of compassion. You can say that from a non-judgmental place. But I think it's really important to be very clear in your message of if-then, right? And so that's kind of boundary setting 101. That's the easy part. And so I often, when I work with folks on this, they'll say, I said the thing and it's not getting any better. And oftentimes when we work through that, what we discover is it's not the setting of the boundary that's really hard, it's the holding of the boundary that's really hard. And so that's why I always recommend be consistent. When you set a boundary, now you have to hold it. Because the other person is probably not going to be super inclined to hold it. If they weren't going to do those things that bother you, they would have already stopped. So it's kind of on you. You're the one that you can control, and so it's kind of on you to be consistent. while being firm and being really loving and compassionate. This doesn't have to be a cutoff. It's just saying this is the fence, right? So you're protecting your energy, your mental health, your well-being, and you're just saying this is the fence. And we can talk through this fence. There's a gate on the fence. We can open the gate and walk through it, but this is the fence that delineates, this is the boundary I need. So and the last one I say is stay in your lane. And what I mean by that is the individuals that you're dealing with are going to have their reaction to that boundary. That's their business. It's not yours. It's not your responsibility. It's not your job to fix it for them. And it's not your business how they respond. And again, if people could just naturally accommodate what it is you need, they probably would have already been doing that, right? And so we think sometimes we're going to set the boundary, we're going to state the thing that we need, and then everything is just going to fall in line. And sometimes it does, and that's great. But often it is really uncomfortable, right? So that you can feel guilty, you can feel like, you just feel like you've done something wrong by stating your needs. And I think it's important to work through those emotions as they come up for you, but to understand that that's not a reason to drop your boundary or to compromise your boundary, right? So they get to have their emotional experience about it, you tend to your emotional experience about it. There can be lots of ways to renegotiate this relationship, to find a common ground without you giving in and saying, okay, fine, forget I said anything, because all that is gonna really come from that is you're gonna continue to feel terrible. And so I always say to folks, setting boundaries can be hard, renegotiating relationships can be difficult, those conversations can be really awkward and painful and uncomfortable. But there's a potential of something else on the other side of it, where if you give in, you compromise your boundaries, and you continue in this dynamic that doesn't serve you, you will continue to not be served. And nothing is going to change for you in terms of how you feel, your ability to feel good and whole and healthy, or the protection of that relationship, right? None of those things are going to happen. So sometimes just working through the difficulty of setting the boundary and seeing what can flourish, because there oftentimes can be something better on the other side. You just kind of have to get through it a little bit. And it can be really hard, so being really self-compassionate in that moment too. We'll close with just a couple practically applied techniques for stress reduction if you are already in the midst of the stress. Or if these other techniques that you try don't really prevent or alleviate stress, what are some things that you can do? So number one, deep breathing and grounding. These are portable, easy, self-directed tools that you can use at any time. So when I say deep breathing, what I specifically mean is breathing into the belly. We call that diaphragmatic breathing. And one of the things, miracle of nature, I do not have the neurological background to explain exactly why this happens, but when we breathe deeply into the belly, it engages the diaphragm, and that helps switch our nervous system activation from the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, to the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest part of our nervous system. It's the calming part of our nervous system. So if you don't know how to take deep belly breaths, just put your hands on your belly and just take a big deep breath in. Some practitioners say through the nose. I say whatever works. If you want to breathe in through your mouth, that's fine too, but just take a deep breath and feel your belly expand. Honestly, just doing that, I was like, oh, I felt it. I felt it all release right there. And so just maybe doing that 3 to 5 times, you can, even if you're at a family gathering or a party, step into the restroom, close your eyes, take a few minutes, 3 to 5 deep belly breaths. One of the things I would suggest is if you know that you're prone to kind of that sympathetic nervous system activation, if you know that you're prone to anxiety and stress, practice that deep belly breathing during times of rest, because then you're going to build that muscle memory to be able to do it when you actually need it. So sometimes in the middle of the afternoon, even if you're feeling okay, just take a couple of minutes, do some, a round of 3 to 5 big deep belly breaths like that. When we talk about grounding, I usually work at this from the five senses perspective. One of the reasons being that if we're going to engage our five senses, we have to be in the present moment. And I think so much of our stress and anxiety is when we leave the present moment, when we're forecasting or we're stuck in the past or we're ruminating on something that may or may not happen. And so if we're going to engage our five senses, we actually have to get in our body. We have to be here, present in the moment. So one of the ones that people are familiar with that I think is a great tool to use is a five senses grounding technique. It's beneficial if you can speak this out loud, but if you're in a public place and you need to just think it, that's okay too. But it's five things that you can see. So you look around the room that you're in, wherever you are, and I see flowers, I see cookies, I see a chair, I see hand sanitizer, I see a computer, right? 4 things that you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And sometimes I find it really helpful to write that on index cards, put it in your wallet, so that if you're activated and you're like, crap, I don't remember what she said to do, you pull that out of your wallet and there's a script right there for you. But honestly, even if the script doesn't come to you or you can't remember what order they should be in, that part doesn't really matter. Just look around the room and just say, I can see a window, I can see my parent, I can see my partner, I can see my friend, I can see that person's shoes, anything. Just using your senses to kind of get yourself back into your body is going to have that calming and grounding effect. It's going to help you deal with the stress. And now you can actually evaluate where you are and see if you need to make a different decision. Meditation is not necessarily an in-the-moment activity, right? I mean, maybe it is. Maybe you're at a big holiday dinner, it's a multi-hour event, and you're feeling a little mentally exhausted, and so you find a quiet room and you sit there for 3 minutes and do a meditation. But engaging in a regular meditation practice is also going to help you ground and center in the moment. So the meditation might not be accessible all the time in all places, but having that as a practice is really going to help you have the tools in different avenues that you would need them. The other thing I would say about meditation is it's a tool for helping us become more mindful. And if we go all the way back to the beginning of how do you know what's causing your stress and how do you know what you would like your holidays to look like? Mindful living and exploration of those questions is going to be the way that you're going to find the clearest answers. So starting to incorporate some meditation into your daily day may help you through the holidays as well as other times of stress. My number one way of dealing with my stress is movement. I have often joked that you can tell if I'm really stressed out about something because my house is tidy. And the relationship there is I pace. I tend to pace. And so I'll be pacing around my house with this nervous energy because that's how I have to kind of get it out. And then as I'm pacing, I start tidying up. And so if you come into my house and it looks like there's no clutter anywhere, it is probably meaning that I'm a little bit stressed out. But maybe it's that you take a walk. Maybe you're at a family gathering and it's just really getting a little bit tense, and just excuse yourself and see if you can take a walk around the block. The fresh air is going to be really great. And sometimes just moving our bodies can help sort of move through some of those challenging emotions. If that doesn't work, you can do it outside of those events, but again, using it as a mindful way of dispelling some of that nervous energy, even if it's going to the gym the next day or going to a yoga class or something along those lines. And then finally, just really being mindful about your consumption, right? So if in the first slide you thought about things that you eat or drink during the holidays, if you thought about the amount of time you spend with other people, if you thought about the ways that you approach the financial aspect of the holidays, are there changes that you can make around that make you feel more comfortable? So going into an event with a game plan of, how do you want to approach what they have to eat or what they have to drink at this event? Think about it before you get in there and just sort of have a framework of what you would like that to look like, so that then you don't find yourself overindulging, or or at least being thoughtful about making choices that will make your body feel best, your mind feel best, and your soul feel best. So taking all together, these can be some great strategies to help you stay kind of calm and cool and collected during a season that can be very chaotic and demanding and challenging. We do want, the festive part of the holidays, but we have to remember sometimes it can be really taxing. So hopefully you reflect on this, think about ways that you can start making some of these changes in your life immediately. And if you ever want to reach out, you can reach me. I'm online at shineandsoar.com. You can give me an email. And I also have a podcast called Pragmatic Alchemy Podcast, and you can find that everywhere you find your podcasts, as well as some select episodes are up on YouTube. So thank you so much. Happy holidays, and I hope that you find peace and joy this season.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.